Can you guys see my screen?
I can see your screen.
Okay, good. So just a quick recap. What we did the other day is that we just introduced you to Terraform, what is Terraform, and how Terraform works behind the scene. Okay, and one of the first component that you have to write is provider. So we have seen a basic of how to write a basic provider block. So this is how you write a basic provider. Okay, so this is what we discussed in the first class. Today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to extend this a little bit. Okay, I'm going to continue on this a little bit before jumping to variables and outputs. So, the other day, what I said is so first of all, you need to intimate Terraform that where you want your infrastructure be created. Okay. If you wanted your infrastructure be created in AWS, you will have to write the provider block for AWS. And if you wanted to create infrastructure in Azure, you need to write a relevant provider block. Okay. Let's try and execute this once again. So because I've cleaned up everything, so let's create, let's go ahead and execute this once again. So let's initialize it once again. Okay, so I'm going to open my command prompt. The command prompt always comes on the other screen. So yeah, so this is the command prompt. So, for simplicity here, I'm just going to work with only one provider. I'm going to take this out. I'm going to take that out. And now I am going to run a Terraform in it because I wanted you guys to notice something. So whenever you do Terraform in it, right? Whenever you do Terraform in it, it always says initializing provider plugin. And if you see this line, this says finding the latest version of AWS. Okay. This is the default behavior. The default behavior is that it will always try to fetch out, okay, it will always try to fetch out the latest version of the provider plugin. Okay, so now the question is, can I cherry pick a particular version? Okay, if you have question like this, yes, it is possible. So now we will see how to cherry pick. So now the latest is 4.49. How can you how can you confirm is that you can go to your provider documentation. So you will go to registry.terraform.io, and then you will click on your provider section and you will pick the provider that you're going to work with. So here we are going to work with AWS. If you see here, the latest version here is 4.49. So as I said, whenever you do a Terraform init, the default behavior is that it will always pick the latest version to work with. Now, for certain reason, you don't want the latest, but you have to work with the lower version. Okay, so now let's assume that we wanted to work with 4.37.0. Let's assume that we wanted to work with 4.37.0. So in this case, what should I do? What changes that should I make in the code in order to inform Terraform to use the lower version rather than always picking the latest version? In that case, if at all you wanted to, this is called as version constraint. Okay, so this concept is called version constraint, where you are applying a constraints on what version the constraints. Okay, you are putting a constraints on what version the Terraform can install. Okay, this is called version constraint. So how you will enable version constraints is whenever you want to put in version constraints, you will have to use a Terraform block. Inside the Terraform block. So Terraform block is a common block. It can have certain things. Okay. So which there are certain blocks which cannot be a standalone block. So when I say standalone block, provider is a standalone block. Okay. Terraform is a standalone block, but there are certain blocks which cannot be standalone. Those blocks can those blocks has to be written inside this Terraform. Okay. So one of the non-standalone block is required provider. Okay. This block cannot be on its own like provider. So which means that this block has to be written inside Terraform. Okay. So in the required block, in the required providers block, I'm specifying AWS equal to, and I'm opening an object, and here I'm specifying I wanted to use a version called 4.37. Okay, so I'm writing a Terraform block, and inside the Terraform block, I am using a block called as required providers. Okay, and in the required providers, I'm saying, hey, I'm going to use AWS, but in AWS, I wanted you to use a version called 4.37. Okay, this is I'm instructing Terraform to do so. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete this, whatever we initialized, I'm going to delete those files. Okay. Now we have just this file. So I'm going to keep running this. Now I'm going to run Terraform init again. Last time, you know that last time we did not have this required provider block, and we know the result. What happened? It was fetching the latest version, which is 4.49. So now let's see what happens when I do Terraform init, because we have added something new here. So I'm going to run Terraform init. So when I run Terraform init, instead of picking the latest version, it says I am finding the version matching 4.37. See the difference. Finding latest version of HashiCorp AWS. And here it says finding HashiCorp AWS versions matching 4.37.0. Okay. And if this is a proper version, it will match and it will install 4.37 in your working directory. See, it is installing and it is installed successfully. So now if I go to this .terraform directory, I can see it has downloaded a 4.37.0 version. And if you see the dependency log file, it clearly says that I have installed a version called 4.37.0. Okay. Is that clear? Any doubts or questions here? Okay, guys, any questions here so far?
Is it possible to do a refresh, like of maybe the Visual Studio Code before you just jump into this work?
Refresh as in, what do you mean by refresh clarity?
Because you asked us to like, install the CLI, which I did.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that was like pretty much the only thing I was able to do. So I wanted to ask like if it's possible for you to do like refresh of like the last work.
Okay, you wanted a revision, quick revision. So how to use this
Yeah.
command prompt?
Yes, before you
Okay,
just jump because I'm trying to connect like these files that we had, like the other two Terraform files while we're walking through.
so means you have two Terraform files and you're trying to do something and it is not working.
Mm-hmm. That's why I
Okay.
was just asking for you
Yeah,
to
if
refresh.
that is the case, what you need to do is you need to check whether you are in the correct directory or not, Clarice. Okay. Sometimes what happens is if you are using an internal terminal, if you open an internal terminal, I'm just showing you a demo. I'm using an internal terminal and I'm going to command prompt. Okay. When I go to command prompt, see, I'm on 23 Jan Terraform directory. I'm not inside class providers. Okay. So here, actually the code is available inside my class 1 providers folder, but currently the terminal is at the one level up. Okay, so if you go and run Terraform init here, it is not going to work. You're going to get saying Terraform initialized in an empty directory, which means the directory that you're currently working is empty. It do not have any Terraform files. So what you need to do is you need to jump into that particular, you need to change your directory using cd command. Do a cd command and give the folder name. It will jump to that particular folder because this folder has only the class 1 folder has the Terraform files. So only from here you can start working. Okay, whenever you see an error called Terraform is initialized in an empty repository, which means that you are working on a wrong directory. You need to always make sure that you're in the correct directory where you have Terraform, because we have clearly told you Terraform will work only on files that comes with an extension .tf. Okay. So any folders which do not have TF, and if you run Terraform commands, it is gonna show weird stuff. Okay, is it clear?
Yes.
Okay. So now, okay. So any other questions before we proceed further? So, does anybody know why the versions are always like two decimals or three items? Like, what do anyone know like why it is 4.37.0? Why do you think they need this? Sorry, why they need three categories here? Any ideas? Why they always need 4.37.0? Why can't it just be 4.3.7.0? Why can't it be like that? Or why can't just be 4.37? Anybody knows why it is this?
Does it have to do with the versioning? Like for
Yes, why?
example,
Uh,
when you for example, when you release when you are having an iPhone, they can have software 2.1 today, then tomorrow they
what
will
is
have.
this? Yeah, that's fine. Every versioning has to be different. Any particular reason it to be having three items here? Do you know what the zero specifies? Do we know what this 37 specifies? And do we know what this 4 specifies? Any idea?
I think 4 is a major version. I think that's
Yes,
kind of an SP level,
exactly. Exactly.
and then it's a patch levels, right? Yeah.
Right. Thanks, thanks. So what happens is, so these three will have significance. I can't write it like this because this is not a standard. I can write it like this because, I can set my own rules, but that will not be compliant with the industry standards. So industry standards says that always it has to be, any versioning has to be like this, okay? Where here, this zero will specify, okay? This zero will specify it is going to be a bug or security fix. Okay, it's a fix. So you would have done something and you would have made a bug or a small mistake and you wanted to change that mistake. So that is the place where you will use a bug fix. Now let's say the latest version is 4.37. So let's assume that we are releasing a new product and the product comes out with the version 4.37.0. As soon as after it is released, we see there is a bug and we wanted to fix it immediately. When we want to fix it immediately, we will make the code change, and while we release the version, the next version will come like this 4.37 point. I am doing a bug fix, so we will bump this version to from 0 to 1. So the next possible release that we will do is 4.37.1 because we are doing a bug or a security fix. Okay, because this last item will specify the bug fix and security fixes. Okay. And now let's see what is middle the middleman do. The middleman is for minor or patches. Okay. Minor or patches. So minor fixes or minor changes or patches, any patches that you want to do. So in this case, when let's say I am releasing a version with 4.3.0, and after this I am doing a minor change or a patch. If I'm doing a minor change or a patch, my next version will come out like 4.38.0 because I am doing a patch on 4.3.0. Okay, and I am doing a major change. Whenever I wanted to release a brand new release, that will be a major change. That major change, whenever a major change happens, what happens is it will start from 5.0. Okay, so from this is the major one. So you will have the major change and you will reset everything to 0. So 5 will be your major change, 5.0.0. So the same happens with every product that you use currently as well, because Israel pointed out at iOS. So every new year you get a brand new version of iOS, right? Last year it was 15, this year is going to be 16, the next year is going to be 17. So what happens is you will get that every year, but then throughout the year you're gonna get regular security updates or performance updates and certain things like that. So if you have noticed, whenever you've done an update, the, the number will be 16.1 point something or 16.2 point something or something like that, because that is how it works. Okay. So now why it is, why it is important to understand this is because this is used everywhere, not only in Terraform, even when you go to GitHub, Bitbucket, whenever you are using a repository, you will have to version the repository or tag the repository, tag the specified commits using these kind of. Okay. And now, writing like this, so now coming back, why I wanted to explain that is and I wanted you to make understand everything. So now, why I wanted to explain this is, so whenever you are using 4, let's assume that you are using 4 version, like currently you are using 4.37. Okay. So today it is 4.37. Why? So now let's see why should we use this version constraint? What is the necessity of it? Apart from, hey, I wanted to use a lower grade or the lower version. Apart from, I wanted to use a lower version. What problems that we will have is what I will send it. So now let's assume that this is not in picture. You are just using provider, which means that basic provider block, which means that every time when you do Terraform in it, it is going to use the latest version. Okay, always it is going to always use the latest version. So now today is going to use 4.49. So looking at the history, last only in the last month they had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 version changes. Okay, in the last 1 month they have done 8 version changes. Okay, so means if 1 month ago if you'd have deployed Terraform, the Terraform would have used 4.42. Okay, and if you deploy the same code today, the Terraform will use 4.49. Okay, because Terraform by default it is always taking the latest version. So last month the same code you don't have to, let's assume you have a same code. If you have done 1 month ago, you would have used 4.42, and if you deploy the same code today, it is going to use 4.49. So let's say the same code you don't use anything, and after 6 months you want to deploy the same code. Probably by then you would have a brand new version 5.0.0. Okay, 5.0.0. So that time Terraform will try to use 5.0.0. Okay, because that is how it works, because it always picks the latest version. So now what's the problem? The problem is that whenever there is a brand new version, whenever there is a brand new version, they will deprecate a lot of stuff. Okay. So they wanted to replace it with a better thing. So what they will do is they potentially can deprecate a lot of stuff. So think of your iOS 14 and 15 or 15 and 16. Every year they come up with brand new features, removing certain other features. Either removing certain other features, they are going to bring brand new things, or they are going to remove something and bring a better version of something, right? So what happens is the Terraform code that was working fine with version 4 now might not work the same with version 5, because this is a major change and they could have duplicated or replaced with better stuff. So the same code which was working absolutely fine 6 months ago in version 14 might not work now. Might not, because there is no guarantee that it's going to fail, but it can fail because there are certain things that can be replaced and duplicated. Okay, so because now if it suddenly fails in prod in after 6 months, that is going to be a hassle for you and your team. So what Terraform recommends is that don't leave it like this. Always use version constraint. Okay, so when you are putting a version constraint, Terraform will consistently pick a particular version which your code is absolutely working fine. So if you have picked 4.37, no matter 1 month, 2 months, 6 months, even after 6 years, if you run the same code, the code is going to consistently work the same. Okay. So now what is a better recommended way of writing the version? The better way of writing the version is like this. You can put a tilde symbol greater than 4.0. Why 4.0? What is the major change now? The major change, current major change is 4, right? So I would put a 4.0. So this is the recommendation that Terraform wants us to use. Why? Because this will So by writing it like this, Terraform will always use versions greater than 4.0.0, and it will always keep the versions less than 4.99.9, or it will always keep it less than 5.0.0, which means that Terraform will always use the latest version of 4, but it will never go to 5. So that way, any bug fixes and minor fixes it is going to fix, because what happens in the minor fixes, so you have 4.8 and you have 4.9, so between this they might have added new resources. If there is a new service and they want to enable capability in Terraform, they might add it, because if you sit in the same 3.7, whatever new resources that has been added in the all above version, you can't use it, because when you write that code and you execute, it is going to say, hey, this resource was uh, released in 4.48 version, so you have to at least have 4.48 version. You will get an error. Now, in order to avoid those kind of errors, what you're doing is you are saying, hey, I wanted to use tilde with greater than 4.0, which means that Terraform will always going to fetch versions greater than 4, but it will keep you under 5, which means, because that is the problem, right? Only when Terraform code automatically goes to a higher version, your code might fail because of certain things that they could potentially remove while going to a brand new version, right? So now this is the recommended version tag that you wanted to have. So always choose the latest one. I think if you are using Azure, you can put 3.0, because currently Azure is running the latest version in Azure is 3.69 point something. So depending on the provider, always go to the provider page and see what is the latest version running. So now it is running with 4.49. So 4 is the major version. So put 4.0. So which means that you will, you will be using the latest versions, but it will never upgrade you automatically to the newest version. Okay, is that clear, guys? So this is called as version constraints on the provider. Okay, any questions here?
So I have a question, Gokul.
Yeah, go ahead.
So in a situation where let's assume that a company is still using, let's say, 2.0 while we're at 4.0 as the updated, right? Um, is okay, I don't know how to ask this question. Is there going to be a time where that 2.0 will completely like become obsolete, or
Yes, yes, very good question. Even I was thought of, the next thing that I'm gonna explain is that, okay. So this is the version constraints on the provider. Okay. Similarly, you can put a version constraint on the Terraform. Okay, you can put the version. So now, so Terraform also has different versions. So currently, I think Terraform is running on 1.13 or something. There are a lot of versions of Terraform: 0.8, 0.10. 0.11, 0.12, and 0.13. After 0.13, they went into 1.0.0. So now, let's say let's say your companies you wanted you to use Terraform version 0.12. Okay. In that case, you will put required version, and the required version is that you will say, I wanted you to use only 0.12. Okay, which is Terraform version 12. Let's see what Terraform version that we are using here. So I am using Terraform version. So I am using Terraform version 1.1.8. Okay. So if you wanted all of your users, because it's all about team, as soon as you go into a corporate world or a IT world, it is a team. It's not only you, it's a team. So team has to be consistently using a same version. So in this case, you can put a dependency saying everybody in the team should at least use 1.1.8. Okay, let's assume this. Okay, when you use 1.1.8, okay, or a higher version of Terraform, that will, so the 2.0 might not be compatible. That is the compatibility issue that you will face, is right? Okay. So if you are using a lower version of Terraform, 0.12, your version 2.0 might work. Okay. But if you keep on upgrading the version, you know, so you will have, sometime Terraform will say that if you want to use this version, the AWS version should be at least 3. You can't use 2. So eventually you will get into this error issue. Sooner or later, you will definitely hit this issue. So it depends on the Terraform version. It's like, do you think iOS 16 is going to fit iOS 16 software that you have currently? Do you think it is going to seamlessly work on iPhone 4 or iPhone 5? Hmm?
No.
No, because compatibility issues. Because the phone's architecture is old because iPhone 4 or 5 came like 10, 12 years ago. So the capacity and the thing, the chip is in that phone is different. So if you go and shove in a brand new thing like iOS 16 update in there, it is going to have compatibility issues. So depending on the versions that you're running will run into a problem or not will be answered by what version that you're trying to use. So as soon as you put a required version as 0.18, when you are running lesser than 0.18, if you're running too much lesser than 0.18, if some engineer has 0.12 version of Terraform, and if they run their code, it is going to say that, hey, your required version is 1.18, so you need to at least have a newer version of Terraform installed before you can proceed. That is the thing that is going to happen. Okay. Does it answer your question?
Yes, yes. Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions, guys, before we proceed?
I have another question.
Yeah.
So still on the same topic, let's assume, for example, we have an environment that has close to, let's say, whatever, 300 accounts, and everything is being managed by Terraform, right? Now, assuming that when they started this project or this design, they had everything at a lower
Version. Yes, definitely.
version. Then now, 3 years down the line, they maintain, they update the Terraform version, but everything else they keep like at a minimal.
Yeah.
So how would they, like, if they have to update everything? You see what I'm saying? How is that gonna work? Because I'm asking that because
that's a right question. That's a right question. See, every time you will have to keep up with the versions, both on the Terraform side and both on the provider side, because every version is gonna give you new capabilities. Okay, if you're running less than 0.12, you are missing beautiful components like for each and dynamic, which is making a life a lot easier. Okay, and there are a lot of new things coming up in the latest version, so you are missing out on everything. So gradually, I would say every 1 year or every 2 year, you need to keep refactoring your code. Okay. So what do you mean by refactoring is that change your code according to the need. So now let's assume that you are using 2.0. 2.0 is old. Okay. 2.0 is old. So now you will have to make a refactoring and jump to 4. So how you can do that is you need to start with your dev environment. Okay. So in the dev environment, because dev environment is something that will have, even if you have a downtime, that's fine. Okay, because without testing anything you can't directly go to prod. So in the dev environment you need to just change this to 4 and run a Terraform plan to see what all warnings and what all errors that you see. Okay, so now I can show you a live warning. So instead of writing the Terraform required version here, so I'm just gonna run it once again. So I put 4.0. Now let's see what happens. So last time it installed 4.37.0 because we explicitly mentioned it, right? So now let's see this time what happens when I run Terraform apply. So now, sorry, Terraform init. So now I put a different version constraint like 4.0. Yeah, that's fine. So I'm gonna run Terraform init now. Let's see what happens. So if you see, it's finding the version matching 4.0. And as I said, it is always going to use the latest one because uh, that will have the latest, all the latest component. But it will never go to 5 automatically, because only if it goes to 5 automatically, it can fail your production. It might fail your production because of the certain things that are duplicated. So now what I'm doing is, instead of specifying the required version here, I am going to put a thing called version equal to, okay, version equal to 4.37. I think instead of the required versions here, I think I'll remove the whole required version thing and I'll put 4.37.0. Okay, 4.37.0. Now I'm gonna run same Terraform init. So it's matching. Okay, it's matching 4.37 and it will install 4.37 also, but it will give us a warning. Let's wait for the warning. Okay, so if you see, it is done, but it is giving us a warning. Okay, what is the warning? Version constraints inside the provider configuration blocks are deprecated. Okay, so see that it's clearly pointing at line number 3. So we were using version constraints like this prior to 0.13. So in 0.13, they deprecated this feature and they asked us to move it inside a provider Terraform block like this, required providers. Okay. And what happens is maybe whenever there is something deprecated, the deprecation will be there for a couple of versions. So after that, they will force you to change it. So how do they force you to change this? This is a warning, so your execution is not impacted. It's still initialized. But maybe in the next maybe in the next version, what they are going to do is instead of showing this as a warning, they will mm, error it. They will fail this. Your initialization will fail saying that, hey, you can't use version constraint like this. Go and change it. They're going to force you to do that. So Terraform's behavior is always same. So they will give people enough time to update their code by showing warnings. But in the upcoming features, they are going to install this warning will convert into an error, which means that they wanted to they because they have been very kind. They were kindly asking you to do it, but you are not doing it. So it clearly says earlier allowed providers inside the provisional block, but this is now deprecated and will be removed in future versions of Terraform. Whenever new versions comes out, this warning will turn into an error. So in that way, in that case, you don't have a choice. You have to change it and move on. If you don't change it, your code will never initialize. Okay. So similarly, this will happen for everywhere. So you will get warnings. So what you need to do is just change the version and run an init and a plan. When you run an init and a plan, it will show warnings and errors. So both, you have to change both. So if you change both, because this is where Terraform modules will come into picture. So if you are using Terraform modules, you are at good place because you can run it against the module and see what warnings and what errors that you have and go to the module and change those things and run a plan. It should give you everything is up to date. You should never see a warning in error. So if you test this successfully in dev and your dev is completely fine, then it is easy because your modules are up to date and your code is up to date. Then you can move this to production, very easily. So whoever is maintaining Terraform, I would say at least 1.5 to 2 years. Every 1.5 to 2 years, you will have to still keep your code in check by refactoring it, or else sooner or later you will uh, face issues because if you are using 2.0, 2.0 is something that I worked in 2018. When I started working, we used Terraform AWS version 2.0. So now it's like 5 6 years, 2018, like 5 6 years now. So you will have to make the recommendation to move to a higher provider versions, or else sooner or later you're gonna face a big issue. Okay, is that clear? That's right. Is that clear, guys?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
So now moving on. So this is the provider. So this is the recommendation. So if you use this recommendation, it is always going to pick the latest version in 4, but it will keep your provider automatically picking the higher version and which might fail your issue, fail your code. Okay, so now this is all about providers, guys. We have spoken enough about providers. So now it's time to jump to the next section, class 2. I'm gonna teach you variables and outputs. Okay, new file, readme.md. Okay, So the variable block, right? The variable block will pretty much look the same. Okay, so majority of the blocks in Terraform will look the same. Okay, so this is the one that we showed for provider. Provider, name, block, and inside the block you will write supported arguments, right? So similarly, the variable block will also look the same. Variable, inside it you will specify a name of the variable, okay, and then you will open a block, and for variable block there are certain arguments that are documented. Only those arguments can go inside this variable. So those are the things that you can write here. See, the how it looks is exactly the same, because when you write provider, it is going to consider that as a provider block. When you write variable, this is going to be a variable block. So same for output. If you want to write an output block, it will pretty much look the same. Output, you will specify the name. Okay, whatever the output name that you want, you will put it here. And then outputs has its own set of arguments. Only those things you can write inside the block. Okay. Now let's look into the arguments. There are certain arguments like description, type, sensitive, okay, sensitive, validation, default, and null level. So these are null level. So these are the 6 arguments that your variable block supports. So if at all you want to write anything inside your variable block, you need to write only among this. You can't just go and write random stuff. Similarly, for outputs, you have description, value, and sensitive. Okay, so these are the things that you have for output. Okay, so now let's look one. Anyway, we will be looking into everything in detail. So now this is how you basically write out variable block. The basic variable block is variable. Then you will write the name, open the curl block, and inside the block you can write among these arguments. You can write for outputs. You can write among these arguments. Okay. So so before we go jump into what is a variable, why a variable is required? Anybody? Why a variable is required? Any idea why a variable is required?
Um,
There is
to
no right.
avoid out coding.
Yes, avoiding hard coding. So what is hard coding is that instead of writing a city name 10 times, like let's assume we have a code, we have a 100-line code. In 100-line code, 10 of the lines we have a value called as, Maryland, for example. Okay, let's assume that we have a reference, we have a value called as Maryland 10 times in a 100-line code. Just a random example, Maryland. So now tomorrow, the Maryland has to be changed to something like Detroit or Dallas or whatever it is. Okay, so you need to go to 10 different places and make changes from Maryland to Detroit. Okay, because there are 10 references, so you have to scroll through all the 100 lines. So now you can say, hey, instead of scrolling, I can just find and replace. That's okay, but still you have to make changes in 10 different places, right? So instead, what you will do is instead of directly writing it as Maryland, you will reference a variable and the variable will hold a value for you. So variable are like placeholders, okay? The variable will hold a value for you, and whenever you want to send, you will reference. So wherever a Maryland is required, you will reference this variable. So by referring the variable, whenever that variable reference, it will go to that location and it will use the value. Okay. So now whenever you want to change the variable, currently let's assume the variable holds a value called as Maryland, and this variable will be referenced in 10 different places. So now whenever there is a change, instead of going to 10 different places and updating it, you can just change the placeholder value in the variable. As soon as you change the value called Detroit here, wherever this variable is being referenced, everywhere the value will be automatically changed to Detroit. So it's like centrally managing a variable. So that is the reason you use variables. Okay. So now, in Terraform, if at all you wanted to use a variable, first of all, you need to declare the variable. Okay. First of all, the first step for using variable is to declare one. declare a variable. So how do I declare a variable? You need to write this variable block. Okay, you need to write this variable block. I'm going to create a new file, some random file. Here. I'm doing this for a reason. Maybe I will tell you at the end of this class. I'm doing this naming, like for a reason, because all we need is Terraform says all we need is .tf, nothing else. So I'm just putting some random names for a reason. I will come back. So how do I declare a variable? You will write a variable block. So I'm going to call this variable city. The variable name is city, and this is called declaring. Declaring a variable. You need to declare a variable before you use it. Okay, declare a variable. And then, as I said, so this is good enough. If you write variables, this is good enough. There is no mandatory needs for you to use any of these arguments. These are all arguments are optional. Okay, nothing is mandatory. Everything is optional. So, which means that if you write a variable like this, it is still going to work. But from an coding standard perspective, you shouldn't be writing like this. So, at least you should write a decent description, which will help your fellow colleagues or your colleagues who might join later. So, what you can do is whenever you're creating a variable, give a decent description of what this variable is about and how this variable is going to be used so that, it is going to make your life a lot easier. Because if you go to a certain company's code, they might have hundreds of variables without description. So when you join their team and look into the code, you will never understand why they have created 100 variables, where the variables are being used. So that is gonna make your life a lot difficult, at least for the initial days. But when you have a clear documentation and clear description like that, okay, this is the name of the city where we are going to deploy something. This is the name of the region where you are going to deploy AC2. This is if you give a decent description, anybody who sees this variable will know what this variable is all about. Okay, so from a coding standard perspective, you need to at least specify the description, like what is the variable is about, and define the type. There are different types. I'm going to put string. We will come back there. So at least from a coding standards, at least write description and the type. So the type being here, what kind of values that this variable can expect. What type of variable, what type of value. So now when you say city, what should be the value that you can expect? I am putting a string. Okay, so that these are the two things at least you should write to help your colleague, fellow colleagues who are working with you to understand the code easily, and also for your future colleagues who might join your team later on the team. And okay, so now, so declaring. So this is called declaring. Okay, so when you this is declaring, and the second thing that you might wanted to do is you need to define a value. So now we have what we have declared. Okay, this is enough. I'm just going to close this rather than jumping between multiple screens. Okay, so now we have declared a variable, but we have not specified a value to the city, right? Have we specified a value? Have we specified a value here?
No.
No, we just say that, hey, we need a variable called city, but we have not defined any value here. The second step is defining a value. For defining a value, we have multiple ways in which we can define a value. We are going to see all of it one by one. Okay. So now I'm going to go back to my terminal. I'm going to switch. So now I'm in class 1. I'm going to change it to class 2 folder because my code is available there. Okay. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Hey guys, can you hear me all right? Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Just give me
Yes.
1 second. I think my headset is dying. I might need to change a new one. Just give me 1 second. I'm gonna go on mute.
Okay.
So,
Okay, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Right. So, as I said, for defining a value, there are multiple ways we are going to look into all the ones. Okay. The very first thing, I've changed my directory to class 2 because the variable code is in class 2 folder. Okay. The class 2 folder, we have the variable. So here in this case, I don't need to run a Terraform init because I don't have any providers. We are just playing around with variables and outputs. Variables outputs are common. This is not something to do with AWS or Azure or anything else. So we don't have to do Terraform init here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to run Terraform apply directly. Okay. So when I run Terraform apply, see here, it says where.city, name of the city, please enter a value. So which means that Terraform is nudging us to say, hey, you have declared a variable called city, and the description of that variable is name of the city, but unfortunately you haven't provided a value. So please specify a value here. So it is prompting you to enter a value. Okay, it is prompting you to enter a value. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give a value called as Chennai here. Okay, and enter. So now it says 0 added, 0 change, and 0 destroy because we are not creating any infrastructure here. We are just playing around with variables, and it says no changes, infrastructure matches the configuration. So it did not find any change. Okay, so what happens is whenever you declare a variable and you don't specify a value, and if you are running through CLI, it is going to prompt. It is going to prompt you to enter a value. Okay. When you are doing it locally. Here I'm doing a local execution. Whenever you run a local execution and if you miss a variable without defining, it is going to prompt you to enter a value. The same case when you are running with Jenkins or any other CI/CD tools, it is going to fail with the error saying that no definition found. Okay, so it works two ways. So it is always important that you, whenever you declare a variable, you have to define a value, or else you are going to see two things. One is that if you are running it from local, it is going to prompt you to enter a value. But if you are running it from a CI/CD like Jenkins or anything else, it is going to make your code fail. So the first step in defining a value is that it will either prompt or fail depending on what you are using. Okay, that is the first thing. You should avoid this at all time. Always make sure that whenever you are declaring a variable, you have to define it. Okay, so how I can define it? So the next thing that I can define is by using a argument called default. Okay, and I'm going to set a value called as net. So now what I'm doing is while declaring, I am setting a default value for this variable. So which means that now the city is going to be Detroit. So now here I am by default setting a value. So at all times, the default value will be Detroit. So which means that now when I run the same Terraform apply command, it is not going to prompt. See, it's not prompting me anything, right? It says no changes in first. So here it prompted me because the variable did not have a value last time. But now we have set a default value, which means that it says there is no change that is required. Okay, is it clear?
That makes sense.
Okay, so now I will tell you what you guys might not have noticed. You guys might not have noticed this file called as terraform.tf state, which automatically created out of nowhere, right? See here, so this is our class 2 folder. I'm gonna delete the state file, by the way. I'm gonna delete this. Okay, so now whenever I run Terraform init, Terraform state, because we ran Terraform init in provider, there was no Terraform state. We did not create any Terraform state, right? But now, because Terraform state will be created only when you run Terraform apply. So state creation, state updation, everything will happen only when you do apply, because apply is the actual command which will go ahead and do something. Okay, the rest of the stuffs are enablers. Okay, Terraform init is an enabler. It will go ahead and fetch the required plugins and install them, which will enable you to run Terraform plan and Terraform apply. Okay, so Terraform plan is just a execution plan. It is just a plan. It does not guarantee you anything. But apply is the only thing that will go ahead and creates or modifies something in your infrastructure. Okay, so now just notice on the left, okay, though I'm running a Terraform apply on the right, just notice on the left in the class 2 folder, just here, as soon as I run Terraform apply, the state file is created, right? And if you look at the state file, this is the basic version of a state file because we are not creating anything here. So what I want to show here is, so you can ask me, hey, we had a variable, but I don't see a variable in my Terraform state. Why? Because Terraform state files don't save anything about your variables. What your Terraform state file will store is, it will store only your outputs and it will store all your resources that you are creating. So unfortunately, till now, we have not created any resource and we did not have any outputs as well. So now let's try to create an output. So I'm going to create an output block. I'm going to create an output block. I'm going to say city name. Okay. Even for output, I can give description. Giving a description will help, a lot of people. The name of the city to be displayed. Okay, displayed on the terminal. And now, as I said here, in here, the value, this is a mandatory argument. You have to write it. If you don't write it, let's see what's the error that you're going to face. So, this value, whenever you're writing an output block, value argument is mandatory. If you don't specify, I have not specified it voluntarily. When you don't specify it, you are going to get this error. Okay. Missing required argument. Okay, the argument value is required, but no definition was found. It clearly says in this output line, it says clearly, it says in this file.tf, line number 7, you have an output called city name. Line number 7, you have an output called city name. The argument value is required, but you have not defined it, which means that I am expecting this, without which you cannot proceed. So I'm going to write a value in here and I'm going to write Google. Okay, I'm specifying this value called as Google. I'm hardcoding a value called as Google. Now, if I run the same Terraform apply, you will not get that error. So now it says change to output city name because previous version of state file did not have any output. So this is the first time I am adding an output. So it is saying changes to output because the state file is changing now. The state file was empty earlier because we did not have an output. I showed you the output was just empty. So now I'm adding a new output. So it is saying changes to output. See, so plus, whenever you see a plus, it is adding something to a state file. Okay, it is whenever you see a plus in Terraform, it is adding something. Adding something called city underscore name equal to Google. So you can say, do you want to perform this operation? Okay, it's going to ask you. If you say yes, it is going to perform the operation, which means the state file will be updated. And see, whenever you use an output, it is going to display on your screen. So previously, it was not displaying anything because we did not have outputs. So this time it says city underscore name is equal to. After the apply is complete, it is going to display all the outputs that you have. Okay, so now when I go to my state file, see the state file has populated the output. So just populated the output section, city name, and the value is Gokul. And it says this Gokul value is a type string. So that is automatic. You don't have to do anything. And this is your old one. The old one had nothing. This backup will be created only in local, guys. If you are using any other method, it is not gonna, you will not see this backup file. You will only see the state file. The state file will get updated. Okay, is that clear? Is that clear how the output works?
Yes. So what if we are using the CI/CD? How do we specify the value for the output?
Okay, see this value you should never hard code. This is just an example. So now let's say, so here I am saying that let's think of a scenario that I might be lying to you. Okay, I am saying, hey, by specifying default as Detroit, the city variable is going to hold this variable. Okay, I'm just explaining you this, but where is the proof? Can I see it in the state file? No. Can I see it in the output no. Then how can I prove that this is the variable that will be used for city variable wherever it is being referenced? Okay, so what I'm going to do is, now let's come to the third step here, which is we have declared the variable already. Good. We have defined the value. How did we define a value? We defined the value using default, right? Default as a value now. So now, what is the third step in using a variable? Is that the third step is that referencing the variable, because only if you reference a variable, it is going to fetch the value. So how do I reference the variable? You need to use this. If you want to refer a variable, you need to put var dot the name of the variable, which is set. This is how you reference the variable. So now we are saying the output should show me the value that is stored in the variable called city. So now if I go ahead and run my Terraform apply, okay, now if you run Terraform apply, see the change. So whenever you see a yellow tilde symbol, it means that it is changing. Terraform is changing. So whenever there is a plus, it is addition. Whenever there is a yellow tilde symbol, it is modification. And whenever there is a minus with red minus, which means that deletion. So these are three things that you need to keep in mind. So now it says changes to output. Earlier, the output was Google. Now the value is being changed to Detroit, because earlier you remember I had a hard-coded value called as Google. So no matter what, it is going to show you Google. So now, depending on what the variable is holding, the variable's value is going to be like this. So now if I'm going to give yes, the output will be Detroit. So now I'm going to change this to something else. Okay, now I'm changing this to Delhi. So now, see, this is the benefit of variables. So now, if it was Detroit earlier here also, when I change this to Delhi, I have to change it here as well. Tomorrow, if I want to change something else in the variable, I want to make changes in two different places. So now, instead, what I can do is, I can specify the value in variable. I can just refer the variable like this. So which means that this output, when it executes, it will go to this variable and it is going to use this value. So now if I go and run Terraform apply again, so it is going to change from Detroit to Delhi automatically. Okay, is it clear? Does it answer your question, Burton?
Yeah, it is clear.
Okay, so this is all about how the variable works. First is declaration. Declaration is writing a block, but by I would expect you guys to at least write description and type, and we are going to see types now. And then whenever you're whenever if this output is not required for every variable, this is just for demonstration. Okay, so the main purpose of output is that if at all you wanted to show something on the terminal when you apply, so if at all you wanted to show something on your terminal, you will use output block, or else you don't have to use output. Okay, is it clear?
Yes, it is.
So this is all about how to variable. So now there are different types of variables. We are going to see all the types of variables. Types of variables. Okay, we are going to see types of variables. There are different types of variables, which is string, number, bool, map, objects. Which okay, these are the different things. I will just tell about string, and then I will have to continue the defining value part. I will just explain string. So string always has to be enclosed within curly bracket. Okay. String, whenever a type is string, it has to be always, it should always be inside a curly bracket. Okay, so what all value that you can hold is inside the curly bracket. It can hold alphabets, it can hold numbers, it can hold special characters. Okay, or no, it can hold combination of alphabets, numbers, special characters. It can hold anything as far as it is inside a double quote. Okay. So whenever you specify it, so you need to think whenever you are going to specify a value, you need to think about the value. Is the value alphabets? Yes. Then the type is string. If the value alphabets and numbers, then it is going to be a string. If the value is going to hold a special character like space, plus any special character for that, even a space is a special character. So before you specify a value, before whenever you're thinking of a value, so hey, I wanted a variable to hold something like this. Okay, like I wanted a variable to hold something like this. Okay, like say hash like this. Okay, let's say I want something to some variable to hold a value like. So now see what is the value here. So it has alphabets, it has numbers, and it has special characters, and it is a combination of everything. So whenever you have a value like this, you need to blindly think it is going to be string, because string is the only thing which will have combination like this. So but you need to make sure that it is going to be inside your double quote. Okay, so that's the string. I'll come back to this shortly. Okay, so now we have seen, we know like what happens when you don't define a value. When you don't define a value, it will either prompt or fail depending on whether you're using local or CACD. And the second thing is that we did a default value. By specifying a default value, by default, it is going to use that value. Now let's see if is there are any other ways in which you can specify a value. Yes, we can do it. The third thing that we are going to see now is environment variables. You can set an environment variable. Before going to environment variable, I want to ask you guys, how many of you have installed softwares on your computer, like Java or Python or any kind of softwares on your computer? How many of you have installed softwares on your computer, like Python? Uh, what I want to ask is, how many of you has changed the system environment variables? There is something called as system environment variables. How many of you have changed system environment variables here?
Yeah, I did that today when I was installing Terraform.
Terraform, good. Anybody else? Anybody else have updated this environment variables?
Yeah, my personal laptop.
Yes, personal laptop. Good. Anybody else who have not done it completely? Anybody has not done it? Okay, Clarice has not done it. Okay, so what happens is, what is the purpose of this environment variables is that, see, what this environment variable has is, it has a bunch of key value pairs. Okay, so if you see my environment variables, so path is a key. Inside path, I have a lot of variables, values. Okay, Google API keys is the key and the value is 0. So what happens is, these are system level variables and variable values. So see, my username is system, and similarly, the processor is 8. So this is a variable. Number of processor is a variable, and the value of the variable is 8. Okay, and similarly, the temp is a variable. This is the value of the variable, just same variables. But what happens is, this is set at a system level. Okay, this is set at a system level so that I can reuse it without specifying anything. Okay, it's all about reuse. So now I know, in order to make it really simple, I'm going to use a Linux terminal here. I'm going to use a Linux terminal that will explain a lot of stuff. So now I'm on my Linux terminal. So in Linux, if you're in Windows, you have to type for env. If you type for env, you will get this edit system variable. This is at the system level. This is at the environment level, which is like a local, means this is like a temporary stuff. Okay, these are the two things you can go and edit. But if you are using Linux, you can type env here. So when you type env here, it is going to show you all the system level variables and local variables in one place. So now if you see, the username is Gokul, right? You can see username is Gokul, and similarly, my home directory is home Gokul. Okay, my home directory is home Gokul. So how I can use this is like, if I want to go to my home directory, instead of typing the whole thing, all I can do is I can use this guy. So now see, where is my directory? I'm in a different directory. If I want to go to my home directory, all I can do is cd dollar home, dollar and home. See, exactly like what I see here, home, $home. So as soon as I do this, see, it is automatically taking me to my home directory, which is Gokul home. Okay. So these are set at the system level. So now I'm back to the folder. So similarly, you can set Terraform variables and values also in your environment. Okay. How can you do it? You can use if you're using Linux, you will use an export command. With an export command, you need to put tf underscore var underscore the name of your variable. Okay. For whatever variable that you want to define a value at your environment level, you need to use export underscore tfr underscore the name of the variable. So I'm going to set a value for city. So I'm going to say city equals, I'm going to use a city. Any city names in E? Any city names in E? Do you know any city names in E?
Ellicott.
Ellicott, is it right?
Yeah.
Okay, let's use this
Yeah.
value. Okay, let's use this one. Okay, right. I'm setting this value here as Ellicott. Okay, I'm exporting it. So if you're on Linux, this export command will work only in Linux. It's not going to work in Windows. I'm going to come back. So export. So now if I type E and B, I should see this in my environment variables. Okay, see, it's available. So earlier it was not available. This is something that I just typed right in front of you, and you can see this in my environment, right? Now, so this is for TFR. Why TFR is that if you wanted to use environment variables for Terraform, it should be like done through this. You need to run an export command. This export command will temporarily set a value on your terminal. Okay, it is going to temporarily set a value on your terminal so we can reuse it. So now think of a scenario. How many variables? So now we have a variable called city, but how many values does your city have now? How many values that the city has now?
Three.
Sorry,
I'll say three.
three. How three?
4.
It has two values.
It has two values. Correct. It has two values. One value called Delhi is coming from default. Another value called Ellicott that is coming from your environment variables. Right? Both are addressing to city. So now city has a value called default, which is Delhi, and it has another value called Ellicott, which is coming from an environment variable. So now we have one variable, but we have defined values using two different methods. So whenever you are in situations like this, somebody should take priority, right? So, somebody should take priority. So who is going to take priority is something that we are going to see now. So who is going to take priority is that when I run Terraform apply, your environment variable is always going to take priority. Okay. So at a given point in time, if you have a value specified in default and also a value specified in environment variables, your environment variable will be given the preference. Is that clear? Your, your environment variables is gonna, okay, is that clear? So how do you create an environment manager? If you're on Linux, you will write export tf var and the name of the variable, name of your variable equal to, you can specify the, this is how you do it. If you're on if you're on Windows, I'm telling this Windows, see at corporate world, you are never going to use your Windows command prompt. Okay, very simple. That is a solid truth. The use of Windows terminal is very, very, very less. Okay, but for the benefit, I'm going to tell.
I use it.
Use it for.
Yeah, I use it at work.
What are you using at work?
Everything. Dev shell.
Dev shell. Okay, cool. So so whenever you want to set environment variables, what command do you use? Do you set environment variables?
No, I've never set an environment variable
Yes.
before.
So in Terraform, a majority of the things, you will use with Linux because that is make your life a lot easier. So in simple here, if you want to do, you will use a setx. Okay. So instead of using export, in Windows, you will use a setx. Okay, setx, the same thing. Setx, tf-var, and then you can give the name of your variable equal to, you can specify a value. Setx is the command that you will use in Windows. Export is the command that you will use in Linux. Okay, you can use either setx or export depending on where you are working. Okay, so this is another way in which you can specify a value. Okay, now there is one more. Okay, there is one more. I'm going to close this out. There is one more way of defining a value, which is a file. You can create a file called terraform.tfvars. Okay, there is a file called as terraform.tfvars which you can create. You can specify the value here as well. So how do I specify a value in terraform.tfvars? So what you need to do is, whenever you are writing in Terraform, what you need to do is you need to know the name of your variable. What is the name of your variable? My name of my variable is city. So I'm going to say city equals, and what is the type of your variable? The type of my variable is string. So as soon as you say string, put a double quotes here. Okay, as soon as you put here, you will put a double quotes here, and then here I can give my variable. Okay, I'm gonna choose Telangana, for example. Okay, my city name is Telangana. I'm putting my city name is Telangana. And now in this case, how many variable values we have? We have one coming from Delhi and one coming from, and another one called Iliad is coming from my environment variables. We know clearly that Ellicott is taking the higher precedence. So now we have a terraform.tfr. So now let's see which one is going to take precedence here. So now when I do terraform apply, the terraform.tfrs is always going to take precedence. Okay, terraform.tfrs is always going to take higher precedence. I'm writing this order in the precedence. Okay, terraform.vars. I'm writing this in a precedence. So if there is no terraform.tfrs, it is going to look for environment variables and use the value. If there is no terraform TFRs and environment variables, it is going to look for default and it is going to use the default value. If none of these are available, it is going to either prompt or fail depending on how you're executing, how and from where you're executing Terraform. Okay. Is it clear, guys? Any doubts here? I want to take a pause here and ask if you guys have any questions here. Right. And there is one final thing. Which is, so here, so far we are running only Terraform apply, right? Here, so far we are running only Terraform apply. There is one final command, which is you will run Terraform apply, but while applying, you can pass a value to a variable directly, which is -var, and you can say the variable name is city, and I want the city to be, okay. So while applying, you can directly specify a variable like this. So -var means you are specifying a variable and the variable name is city and the value should be California. So if you directly give a value during the execution time, that is going to take the highest precedence. Okay, that is going to take the highest precedence, which means that li using -var flag. Okay, so it doesn't matter whether you have a value specified in any of this method. You could have values already defined in any of these values, any of these methods. But if you send the value like this while the execution time is going to take the highest precedence. Yeah, there is.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about the TF-vars.
Mhm.
Is that a file for variables?
Yes, it is a file for variable definitions. If you want to
Definitions.
specify a value, yes. So we need to keep up with this terminology, guys. Declaring means writing a block. This is called declaring. Okay. Defining a value means specifying a value. So Terraform.tfrs is used to define values for all variables. Okay. So if you are having 10 variables, you can write all the values here. So now let's say you have city 2 as a variable and the value was something else, you can write. So you can have means for if you are creating, if you're declaring 10 different variables, all the values can be in one place, one file called terraform.tfs. This is to define values for your variables. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Any other questions here? Okay, cool. So now there are different ways, but I haven't told you the use cases yet, right? I have told you these are the different ways in which you can specify a value. I have not told you which is recommended, when you should use what. So I have not specified the use cases for this. Let me tell you the use cases. So I would always recommend you to use I will always recommend you to use Terraform.tfrs. Why? Because in Terraform.tfrs, every variable will be in one place. So it is, user readability is going to be high and it is going to make your process look seamless. Because if you want to look into all the variable values at once, you just come to this file and it is just going to have variable names and the value means this is we are using to define all the values for the variables for all the values. So everything will be in one place. Okay, that is one. So the second thing I wanted to use is default, but don't use too much of default. Okay, don't use too much of default. When I will use default is that if I am very certain that a particular variable value will never change. Okay, whenever I think. So now let's say I am very sure that this city value should always remain Delhi. I am very sure that this value is going to never change. In this case, I will write the default. Once I write the default, I will not specify the variable in my terraform.tfs because when I don't specify anything, default will be used. Okay, when I don't because now if I have a default and a terraform.tfs because we clearly know that terraform.tfs take precedence over your default or environment. So then there is no point in writing two different values here, which will cause confusion. So don't use too much of default, but I will still use default as my second option. Whenever I have a value which that rarely changes or never change, I will use default. And when I specify default, I will remove it from my terraform.tfr files. Okay, that's how about default. Okay, this environment variables and CLI, this will be mostly used in conjunction with your CI/CD. Okay, this will be mostly used in conjunction with your CI/CD. Now, when can I use environmental variable is that when you don't want it to set a value explicitly in your code. Let's say you have a secret or something, or you have a value which is sensitive and you don't want it to show up on your code. In that case, you can use environment variables. Okay. So when we do AWS configure in the next class, we are going to see about authentication. And there we are going to deal with AWS CLI, which is a access key and secret key. So access key and secret key cannot be written on your code directly because if you do, uh, everybody can see it. So in that case, what you're going to do is you're going to set in an environment variables in your computer and means if it is in your computer, only you can see it and only you can access it. But the code will be able to use it. Just like today we set Ellicott and Ellicott was able to be used. Terraform was able to use that Ellicott, right? So similarly, your access key and secret key, we will set it on your computer and when running the code in the code we are not going to give your access key and secret key explicitly, but this code will still pick those from your environment variables. Okay, so environment variables will be used when when you don't want it to show up a particular value on your code. You want to keep it secret. What you will do is you will set an environment variable because if you set environment variables, only you can see it, nobody else can see it, but the code will still be able to use that value to do whatever work that it wants to do. Okay, and then this CLI command will be mostly used in conjunction with CI/CD. Okay, CI/CD is that this value, let's say this value has to be dynamically created. Okay, this, let's assume this value has to be dynamically created. Let me see if I have my Jenkins running. I have a local instance of Jenkins. So let's see if I have my local, Jenkins running. If I have a Jenkins running, I can show it directly. Okay, looks like my Jenkins is down. Okay, I can, I'll be able to show that, later in the code. So what happens is this value, if you want this value to be dynamically generated, you can do it through Jenkins. So what happens is whatever parameter that you set on your Jenkins pipeline, that value you can directly give it here. So that if you are running for dev, it can use a different value. If you're using for a prod, it can use different values and do it. So apart from this, this is used directly in Jenkins, not in Terraform code. If you want to pass a value to Terraform from Jenkins, these will be used. CLI and CLI will be used. This environment is something that when you don't want it to show up a particular values on your code, you can use environment variables. Apart from that, I would always recommend you to use Terraform.tfrs and defaults for whatever use case that I said, and always try to avoid this, which is whenever you make a habit, whenever you declare a variable, you have to define it. Don't leave it undefined. Okay. If you leave it undefined, then it can either prompt or fail depending on what you're doing. If you are using your local CLI, it is going to prompt you to enter a value. But if you are using a CI/CD, it is going to fail, saying, hey, no definition is found. You have declared a variable, but no definition is found, which means that you have said something, but you have not set a value. Okay, is it clear, guys? Okay, so now maybe some might be thinking that I took a U-turn here, because so far I have been telling you any files that you create, any files that Terraform wants to recognize, I told you the extension has to be tf.tf. But here I am telling you a complete different thing, saying, I am putting .tf vars. Okay, I'm telling .tf vars. Now let's spend a couple of minutes here just to see what. Okay, so now these are the files that Terraform will use. Terraform recognized file extensions. Okay, file extension. So Terraform, so when you're running Terraform in a particular folder, okay, let's assume I'm running a Terraform commands in this class 2 folder. So whenever I'm be it any folder, it will pick any file names that starts and it will pick up any files that ends with extension .tf. The star represents the file name can be anything, just like here I've written some random stuff. You can write any file name, but the file name should end, the extension should be .tf. So if it is like that, Terraform is going to recognize and use that file. Okay, that is point number one. And the point number two is that Terraform will pick any file names with the exact file name like this, terraform.tfrs or terraform.tfvars.json. If the file name is exactly like this, Terraform will use this. Okay. If the file names, you can name the file anything, but as far as it completes with .auto.tfvars, Terraform is gonna pick. So the file name can be anything. You can write some random stuff. And if this ends with an extension .auto.tfrs, Terraform is going to recognize this. Similarly, it will recognize any file name that it is ending with an extension .auto.tfrs. So these are the only items that Terraform is going to recognize. Okay, these are the only items that Terraform is going to recognize. Apart from this, files like Terraform files like readme.md. Let's assume that I'm going to create a Python file here, hello.python. So it is not going to use, it's going to not read this Python file. It's not going to read this .md. It is always going to find only if the file is ending with .tf extension, or exact files names like terraform.tfrs and terraform.tfrs.json, or any file names that end with .auto.tfrs or .auto.tfrs.json. So these are the things that Terraform will recognize. Okay, is it clear?
Yes.
Now, and the next thing is that this terraform.tfrs, right? Okay, so so this terraform.tfrs, there is another different thing that you can do. Okay, so the same TFR file, but in a different way. Now, let's say I don't want this to be terraform.tfrs. Instead, I wanted it with, so let's say I'm reusing this code. I want this to be dev.tfrs. Okay, I want it to be dev.tfrs. Let's say the dev team currently sits in Cincinnati. Okay, Cincinnati. But my prod, I want another file called like this, prod.tfrs. Okay, and here I want this, the value to be different. Equal to, I'm gonna choose Washington DC. Okay, so means whenever, so I wanted my city to use different values. If I'm running the code in dev, I wanted the value called Cincinnati to be used. If I'm deploying in prod, I want the city name to be Washington DC. In this case, I'm creating two TFRs. So dev TFRs and prod TFRs. Okay. So now when I run Terraform apply will Terraform apply pick dev or prod? What do you think it will pick when I run Terraform apply here?
It will take prod.
Why?
Because it's the last precedent.
No, wrong. Any other question? Any other answers? Now I don't have a terraform.tfrs. Instead, I have dev.tfrs and prod.tfrs. So when I run Terraform apply, what do you think Terraform will pick? Dev.tfrs or prod.tfrs?
Yes, because that's the first
Dev.
file.
Okay, that's the first file. Okay, I think couple of devs. Okay, any other answers?
I would say none, but I don't know.
Okay, okay. So what did we just see? What did we just say? What did we just say here? So now tell me what Terraform is going to use. Just looking at this, I just explained this, and follow up I gave a real case scenario. So just read this. Just recollect what I said here, and now tell me when you run a Terraform apply, what's going to happen?
It's gonna fail.
Okay, it's going to fail. Yeah, that is partly correct. Yeah. So okay, what happens is Terraform will neither use dev.tfrs nor use prod, because does it does it does it fit this criteria?
No.
No. So when it does not create this criteria, Terraform will never use dev or prod.tfr. So here, why I said Israel answer was partly correct is because in the variables already have a default value, so it's not going to fail. If this default was not available, it is going to fail because the value is not specified any other way. The only place the value is specified is in my dev.tfrs or my prod.tfrs. In that case, it is going to fail. But here, default is there, so it is never going to fail. So in the worst case, it is going to use a default because default is the last priority, almost the last priority. So since we have a value, it's going to use that. So here, when I run Terraform apply, the Delhi is going to come out. Okay, now Delhi is going to come out. So now you can ask me a question: how can I deploy this code in dev or prod? If I wanted to deploy it in prod, what I will do is I will say Terraform apply hyphen var hyphen file. Okay, hyphen var. So hyphen var is to pass a variable. Hyphen var file is to pass a file. So I'm going to say use dev.tfrs. Okay, hyphen var file use dev.tfrs. This time it is using Cincinnati. First, what value do I have in dev.tfrs? I have Cincinnati. So value called Cincinnati is being used. Similarly, I can do Terraform apply -var -file, but this time I wanted to deploy it in my prod. So I wanted to use the value set for city in the prod.tfr. So I'm saying use this file instead. So now the value is Washington DC. Okay, because Washington DC is coming out for, but the variable is same. So in certain stage you will have a common code, but you will have to deploy the same code into multiple environments like dev prod. So what you can do is you can have a own set of values for dev and own set of values for prod differentiated like this, depending on where you want to deploy. If you want to deploy it in prod, you will use this flag called -var -file. You specify the TFR file. So this is like explicitly specifying a file, okay? Because Terraform.tfrs is default, okay? If you don't specify, even if you don't specify, because whenever we had a Terraform.tfrs, we did not write this, extra items, correct? We did not write these extra items when we used Terraform.tfrs because Terraform.tfrs is automatically recognized, okay? Okay, terraform.tfrs and .tf and any structure that comes like this is automatically recognized. Sometimes people will write terraform.tfrs, but they will make a spelling mistake. Instead of form, they would put from. That is a basic thing that I've seen. Instead of fo, they put from. So even in that case, it's gonna fail because, as I said, it has to be exactly in the same naming convention. Only then it is gonna pick automatically. If you have any other names apart from these, like dev.tfs and prod.tfs, whenever you're writing Terraform plan and Terraform apply, you have to explicitly specify the file. Okay, is that clear, guys?
Yes.
Okay. Any questions? Any questions?
Yeah.
Before
So
yeah.
so had it been we had just probably one application vars .yaml, or let's say one dev t vars tf vars .yaml, so you would have picked the dev t vars .yaml, not the default one, right?
No. It will always pick the default one. The default one, sorry. Okay, yeah, dev TFRs will take the precedence provided you give it like this. See, the TFRs concept is common. The TFRs will always take precedence. Where is my redo? The TFRs will always take precedence over your default. Okay.
Yes.
So at your runtime, if you clearly specify use the TFR dev.tfrs, it is going to use a dev.tfrs value. If you at the runtime, if you just give only Terraform apply, let's say you are giving only Terraform apply, which means that this will not be picked automatically. The dev TFRs will not be picked automatically. So what are the other values you have? The only value that you have is in default. In this case, the default value will be used.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. I think Clarice, you want to ask something?
Yes. So
Yeah.
so I'm just asking because when you showed the files, the different type of Terraform files, you only use that Terraform.tf vars, and then you have the auto. So that auto.tf vars is also the same. It's another name. It doesn't have any meaning. I'm just asking that. There's no meaning.
You can
It's
have
just the
any
name.
name. You can have any name, Clarice. What I'm saying is you can have any name
No,
.tf
I'm
vars.
talking based on the three options you gave us. So I'm talking based on the three options because you gave us the first one and the second one and then the third one. So I'm just asking,
So
does it mean anything? Or
this one,
it's
the
just the name?
auto.tfrs.
Yeah, does it mean anything or it's just the name? That's what I'm asking. Like, does it just mean
Okay.
anything?
Yes, it
Or it's just the name?
it means yes, it means something. So what happens is the auto.tfrs is that definite pick. Whether you have Terraform TFRs or not, so it's like, okay, maybe I could say this auto.tfrs will take precedence over your Terraform.tfrs. Okay, I can put it like that. The concept is same, but when you have a Terraform.tfrs or something .auto.tfrs, in this case, the value that is coming from the auto.tfrs, okay, the file name can be anything. Okay, I'll put a file name like this to avoid confusion. File name.auto.tfrs. This auto.tfrs will take precedence over your terraform.tfrs. Okay. So if you have a city called Cincinnati coming from Terraform, TFRs, but if you have a value called as, Maryland coming from auto.tfrs, that will be the highest precedence. But the use case of auto.tfrs is very, very less. As far because I have, for the past 4 or 5 years, I've been working with a lot of clients as a freelancing thing, and I'm doing, I've worked on a lot of different gigs and projects. The auto.tfrs is very, very, very less used. Okay, so if you ask me if both can coexist, yes, both can coexist in the same place. But if you have same variable and values coming from both the files or different values coming for the same variable, then auto.tfrs will be taken given the higher precedence.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. These are really good questions from all of you. That gives a sense of idea that everybody is focusing and listening to the classes, because some of the classes that I do, there will be barely any questions. That's good that majority of you here are asking questions and chipping in here and there. Yeah, that's a very good sign. Keep it up. Oh, any other questions before we proceed? So now that's the reason I have it here. And then the next thing is that we can go ahead and use. I think I explained this dev and terraform.tfrs. This no longer serves purpose for now. I'm just going to rename this to terraform.tfrs. Terraform.tfrs. Okay. So now so the one thing that we missed is types of variable. So I've told you only about string. So number. What does the name say? What does the name clearly says? The name clearly says I am a number. So which means that you have to specify this types of variable. When you have a type called number in a variable, you have no other go. You have to use only numbers. Okay. While using numbers, you can write it, just like that. You don't have to put double quotes or anything. Whenever it is a number, you can just specify the number. That's all. So whenever you have a variable and that should accept only numbers, you will specify the type as number. Okay. You can give it just. Okay. And then comes your bool. So bool is boolean. Okay. So boolean here will accept only two values. The values can either be true or false in the lower case. Whenever you have a variable which should hold only true and false as a value, you will use boolean. Okay, you will use boolean. But whenever you have a type boolean, it will accept only true or false in the lower case. Again, here you don't have to put quotes and all, because true and false is a keyword. So you can think, hey, this comes under alphabet. Shouldn't this be enclosed within double quotes? No, because true and false is a keyword. So keywords don't have to be inside quotes. Okay, and list. In list, so what is a list? What is the English meaning? What is the meaning of list? What is the English meaning of list? What is the English meaning of list?
I guess a collection of things, or
Collection of things. Yes, correct. It's a collection of things or collection of items. Okay. So since it is a collection, it has to be inside a square bracket. So inside this, you can have item. You can have item 1, item 2. You can have like this. You can have item 1, and both the items should be separated by comma. Okay. So item 1, item 2, and then item 3. You can have how many other items as you want, but there is a catch. The catch is that all the items should be of similar type. So which means that if I'm using a string, every item should be a string. Okay. So list is a collection of similar items. So if it is a string, everything should be a string. You can't have a map in there. So see, simple thing here, I can have it like this. I can have Gokul. Gokul is one string. So the type is here is string. So which means that the next item should also be a string. So I can give 45. So, so as soon as, though it is a number, as soon as you close within a curly bracket, sorry, within your, as soon you can write number, but if you enclose within quotes, this is considered as a string. Okay, this is considered as a string because it is inside quotes. I can possibly write 45 just like this. When I write 45, it will automatically convert this 45 into a string. Okay, but what you can't do is you can't have a map inside a list. I'm going to teach you map. You can't have a map inside a list. It's going to be a problem. Okay, so if you give, you can give 59. The 59 is okay because it's a number and string accepts number. So what it will do is the type conversion will automatically happen. So this, when you see it in output, this 59 will be inside double quotes, but you can't have any other types inside. So list is a, so simple thing that I wanted you to keep in mind is list is a collection of simple items, sorry, similar items. Okay. Now coming to map, map is a, map always has to be inside curly brackets. Okay, always is at curly brackets. Map is a collection of key value pairs. Map is a collection of key value pairs. So it is like, it should be like this. Key1 equal to value 1. Key2 equal to value 2. So map is a collection of key value pairs. Again here, the values has to be very similar. Okay, if you are using a string, every value should be a string. Every value should be a string. You can't have a value like, Gokul here, and then you can't have a list. Because see, this key value is a string, but this key value is a list. You can't have it like this. If you're using a string, then every key value should be a string. If you're using a list, everything should be a list. So it's a collection of similar items. So map and list are a collection of similar items. List will be enclosed in flat brackets or square brackets. Map will be in a form of curly brackets. Okay, this is a high level understanding. Anyway, we will be digging deep right now. And objects and tuples, these are little bit complex. These are little bit complex variables. So now I said list and maps are collection of similar items, right? So objects and tuples are nothing but you can call them, brothers of list and map. Okay. So objects is a brother of map. Tuples is the brother of list. So what happens is these two guys will accept only data of similar types, but these two guys are exactly the same, but they can accept different data types. So here tuples is a collection of different data items. So this is like list. List can accept only a collection of similar items, but tuples give you the luxury to use different items. The data item can be different. So which means that I can have a string, I can have a map inside this, map inside say city equal to Delhi or something. Okay, so see, a tuple has, it has a string, and it has a map inside it. So tuples will not complain, but when you do the same thing in list, it will complain. Similarly, map, as I said, we can't have it like this. I said, if it is Gokul, this value should be a string. It can't be a list, but this is acceptable in objects. So these are the complex variables, which we will see in the end of the course when we are covering functions, because now at this moment, it is more important for you to understand list and map to a good extent. So when we teach objects and tuple, it will automatically make sense. So for that reason, these two things we will ignore for now until later. So now we will see all these 5 types of variables now. Okay. So we have already seen one variable, string, right? We have already seen one variable and we have displayed it. Now let's see what I can do in, number. So I'm going to say city code or something, city code or something. And then the same thing, whenever you declare a variable block, make a habit of writing a description. Zip code